The mission had gone catastrophically wrong in under 3 minutes. 16 Navy SEALs were trapped in a dried riverbed in the Paktika Province, eastern Afghanistan, with enemy forces closing from 3 sides. Radio communication was dead. Air support was 40 minutes out. Ammunition was running critically low, and the Taliban fighters surrounding them numbered somewhere north of 180, with more arriving every minute. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Reeves pressed himself against the sun-baked rocks, feeling the heat radiate through his tactical vest. Blood ran down his left arm from shrapnel that had torn through his sleeve when the first RPG had exploded. Around him, his team fought with the disciplined ferocity of warriors who knew they were living on borrowed time. Tangos moving up the North Ravine, Chief Petty Officer Davis Rodriguez shouted over the staccato crack of rifle fire. At least 30 using fire and movement tactics. Reeves checked his tactical display, though he didn't need to. He could hear them. The enemy was conducting a textbook 3-pronged assault, squeezing the SEAL element into an ever smaller kill zone. In 15 minutes, maybe 20, they would complete their encirclement. After that, it would be a massacre. "Conserve ammunition," Reeves ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Aim shots only. Make every round count." Petty Officer Second Class Jamie Chun crouched beside a boulder, her M4 carbine tracking targets with mechanical precision. She'd already dropped 4 enemy fighters, but for every one that fell, 2 more seemed to take their place. Her magazine was down to 8 rounds. She had 2 spares left. Simple math told her exactly how this ended. "Sir," Sergeant Kyle Morrison called out, the team medic's hands covered in blood from treating wounded. "Patterson's hit bad. Femoral artery. I can slow it, but he needs a surgeon in the next hour or he's done." Reeves felt the weight of command settle heavier on his shoulders. Petty Officer Patterson was 23 years old, married, with a daughter he'd never met because she'd been born 2 weeks after this deployment started. He deserved better than bleeding out in an Afghan riverbed because his commander had led him into a perfectly laid trap. The operation had seemed routine 12 hours ago. Intelligence indicated a Taliban logistics coordinator was moving through the valley, transporting weapons to fighters operating along the Pakistani border. The SEAL team would insert quietly, establish observation, and either capture or eliminate the target depending on circumstances. Standard counterterrorism work. The insertion had gone flawlessly. 2 helicopters had dropped them 8 kilometers from the target area under cover of darkness. They'd moved through rugged terrain for 5 hours, reaching their observation positions at dawn. The village they were watching had seemed quiet, normal activity, no obvious threats. Then the world had exploded. The Taliban had been waiting. They'd allowed the SEAL element to move deep into the valley before triggering the ambush. Mortar fire had driven them into the riverbed, and once there, machine gun positions had opened fire from the surrounding ridges. Within minutes, the team was pinned down, taking casualties, with their communications jammed by military-grade electronic warfare equipment. Now, 40 minutes into the fight, Reeves was running out of options. His team was surrounded, outnumbered 10-1, and taking fire from elevated positions they couldn't effectively engage. "RPG," someone shouted. The rocket-propelled grenade screamed overhead, impacting 30 meters behind them. The explosion sent rock fragments scattering like shrapnel. Reeves heard someone cry out, then saw Petty Officer Jackson slump against the rocks, blood streaming from a head wound. Morrison scrambled toward Jackson, but another burst of machine gun fire forced him flat. "I can't reach him, sir. The angle's too exposed." Reeves did the calculation he'd been avoiding. Casualties: 3 wounded, 1 critical. Ammunition remaining. Maybe 10 minutes of sustained fire. Enemy forces growing by the minute. Extraction timeline: at least 35 minutes until helicopters could reach them, assuming communications could be restored. 0 probability of mission success. 0 probability of survival. "Sir," Rodriguez said quietly, sliding up beside Reeves. The senior chief's weathered face was grim. "The men know." Reeves nodded slowly. These were SEALs, among the most elite warriors on the planet. They could read a tactical situation as clearly as he could. They knew they weren't making it out of this riverbed alive. But what none of them knew, what nobody could have anticipated, was that salvation was already in position, watching them from the rocks. Staff Sergeant Alex Cole had been tracking the SEAL element for 6 hours from positions they didn't know existed. Cole was a Marine Corps Scout sniper, attached to a force reconnaissance unit operating independently in the same province. His team had been conducting their own surveillance operation 3 kilometers north when they'd intercepted fragmentary communications indicating a SEAL element was moving through the area. Standard operating procedure was to maintain radio silence and avoid interfering with other units' operations. Cole had been prepared to do exactly that, until he'd spotted the Taliban fighters moving into ambush positions. "Sir," Cole had whispered into his radio to his team leader, Captain Sarah Mitchell. "We have a problem. Taliban fighters, roughly 200, setting up a complex ambush. The SEAL element is walking straight into it. Can you warn them?" "Negative. Different frequency, and they're maintaining radio silence for operational security." There had been a long pause. Then Mitchell's voice, tight with tension. "Can you get into position to provide overwatch?" Cole had studied the terrain through his spotting scope. The Taliban ambush was positioned along a dried riverbed, with elevated fighting positions on 3 sides. But there, to the east, a rocky outcropping rose above the enemy positions. The angle would be extreme, the range pushing the limits of his rifle, but it was possible. Affirmative. But it's a solo movement. The terrain won't support a 2-man team. How long to get in position? 90 minutes. Maybe 2 hours. Do it. I'll try to raise their command net, warn them off, but if that fails, you'll be their only chance. Cole had immediately begun moving, leaving his spotter behind with the rest of the force recon element. He'd traveled light. Rifle, ammunition, water, and nothing else. Every ounce mattered when you were moving fast through hostile territory. The climb to the outcropping had been treacherous, loose rock and steep grades that required careful movement. But Cole had grown up in Montana, hunting with his father in the Beartooth Mountains. Steep terrain was familiar ground. He'd reached his position 30 minutes before the ambush was sprung, settling into a hide between 2 large boulders that provided cover and concealment. Through his scope, he'd watched the SEAL element move into the valley, watched the Taliban fighters track them, watched the trap close. When the first mortar rounds had impacted, Cole had been ready. His finger rested lightly on the trigger, his breathing controlled, his mind calculating ranges and angles with the automatic precision of thousands of training hours. But he didn't fire. Not yet. The rules of engagement were clear. He couldn't engage unless American forces were in imminent danger of death or serious bodily harm. The moment the ambush was sprung, that condition was met, but Cole waited anyway, assessing the tactical situation. The SEAL element was pinned down, but fighting effectively. They might break contact, might find a way out without his intervention. If he opened fire too early, he'd give away his position and potentially make things worse. So he watched and waited, his crosshairs tracking from one Taliban fighter to another, prioritizing targets in his mind, building a mental map of the battlefield. When the SEAL's communications went dead and the enemy began their final assault, Cole knew the decision had been made for him. If he didn't act now, 16 Americans were going to die in that riverbed. He settled his breathing, placed the crosshairs on his first target, and pressed the trigger. The Taliban machine gunner on the northern ridge never knew what killed him. One moment, he was pouring sustained fire into the American position. The next, he was dead, a single round having struck him center mass from an angle that shouldn't have existed. Cole worked the bolt on his M40A5 rifle, chambering another round. Target 2, a squad leader coordinating fighters on the western ridge. Range, 892 meters. Wind, gusting from the southeast at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. Elevation, significant downward angle requiring compensation. He made the adjustments instinctively, pressed the trigger, and watched through his scope as the squad leader collapsed. The effect on the battlefield was immediate and dramatic. The coordinated Taliban assault suddenly lost its coordination. Fighters began looking around wildly, trying to determine where the shots were coming from. The angle was all wrong for fire from the riverbed, but there was nothing above them. The outcropping Cole occupied was supposed to be inaccessible. In the riverbed, Lieutenant Commander Reeves heard the shots and saw two enemy fighters drop in quick succession. His combat-trained mind immediately recognized what was happening. "We've got a friendly sniper," he called out to his team. "Unknown position, but someone's engaging from elevation." Chief Rodriguez pointed northeast toward the rocky outcropping that rose above the enemy positions. "Has to be from there, sir. The angles match. That position is over 2 clicks out," Reeves said, disbelief evident in his voice. "Nobody's making those shots at that range in combat conditions." "Somebody is," Rodriguez replied as another Taliban fighter fell. Cole was firing methodically now, selecting targets with ruthless efficiency. Not the closest threats, but the force multipliers. Radio operators coordinating the assault. Heavy weapons specialists. Experienced fighters he could identify by their movement and positioning. Shot 5. An RPG gunner preparing to fire at the SEAL position. The gunner fell, his weapon clattering down the rocks. Shot 6. Another machine gun crew setting up on the southern ridge. Shot 7. A Taliban commander gesturing orders to his fighters. Each shot was carefully aimed, each adjustment calculated for distance, wind, and angle. Cole's rifle became an extension of his will, reaching out across nearly a kilometer of hostile terrain to deliver precise, surgical violence. The Taliban force began to fracture. The coordinated assault devolved into confusion and panic. Fighters who'd been advancing with confidence suddenly found themselves taking fire from an impossible angle, watching their leaders and key personnel fall one by one to an enemy they couldn't see. In the riverbed, the SEALs seized the opportunity. With pressure easing from a northern ridge, they began redistributing ammunition, repositioning wounded, and establishing better defensive positions. "Patterson," Reeves called to Morrison. "Still alive, sir, but barely. We need that medevac." As if in answer to a prayer, Rodriguez suddenly shouted, "Radio's back." The jamming just stopped. Cole had eliminated the communications specialist operating the jamming equipment with shot number 11. The Taliban's electronic warfare capability died with him, and suddenly the SEAL element's radios crackled back to life. Reeves grabbed his handset. Any station, this is Ghost Actual. We are troops in contact, requesting immediate air support and medevac." "How copy?" "Ghost Actual, this is Reaper 6-1. The voice of an attack helicopter pilot came through clearly. "We're inbound your position, ETA 12 minutes. Understand you need fire support and medical evacuation." "Affirmative, Reaper. We've got 1 critical, multiple wounded, and we're surrounded by approximately 180 hostile forces." "Copy that, Ghost. Fast movers are spinning up now. Hold tight, we're coming." 12 minutes. It might as well have been 12 hours, but it was better than the zero hope they'd had 5 minutes ago. The Taliban, despite their losses and confusion, weren't finished. A group of approximately 30 fighters began massing in a ravine on the western side, preparing for one final assault. They'd recognized that their carefully planned ambush was falling apart, and they were going to try to overrun the American position before reinforcements arrived. Cole saw them gathering through his scope. He adjusted his position slightly, getting a better angle on the ravine. Then he began firing as fast as he could acquire targets. Shot 12, 13, 14, 15. Each round found its mark. Fighters fell, the assault wavered, but they kept coming. These were hardened Taliban veterans who'd been fighting for years. They weren't going to break easily. Cole's rifle barrel was hot now, the metal radiating heat. He'd fired more rounds in the last 20 minutes than in most of his previous combat engagements combined. His shoulder ached from the recoil, his eyes strained from staring through the scope, but he kept firing. In the riverbed, Petty Officer Chun suddenly pointed at the massing Taliban fighters. "Sir, they're going to rush us." Reeves saw it too. Despite taking casualties, enough fighters were gathering for a human wave assault. In close quarters combat, the Taliban's numerical superiority would be overwhelming. "Prepare for close quarters," Reeves ordered. "Fix bayonets. Transition to sidearms when your rifles run dry. We make our stand here." The SEALs prepared for the final fight, but they never had to make it. Cole's sustained fire broke the Taliban assault before it could fully develop. He was firing continuously now, barely pausing between shots, his rifle becoming an automated killing machine. Fighter after fighter fell until the assault simply disintegrated, survivors breaking and running for cover. The distinctive thump of helicopter rotors suddenly filled the air. Two AH-64 Apache attack helicopters came screaming over the ridgeline, their 30mm chain guns already engaging targets. Behind them, a pair of UH-60 Blackhawks approached carrying the quick reaction force. Cole ceased fire, watching through his scope as the cavalry arrived. The Apaches made devastating gun runs, their thermal sensors identifying Taliban positions, and their weapon systems eliminating threats with surgical precision. Within minutes, the battlefield transformed from a desperate last stand to a routine combat extraction. The Blackhawks landed in the riverbed, and the QRF poured out, establishing a secure perimeter. Medics rushed to the wounded SEALs, and within 10 minutes, the entire element was loaded and lifting off. Cole remained in his hide, watching the evacuation complete. Only when the helicopters were clear and the valley had fallen quiet did he begin his own extraction movement. He'd fired 28 rounds, eliminated an estimated 26 enemy fighters, and saved 16 American lives. It was the best shooting of his career, and nobody except his own team would ever know his name. 2 hours later, Cole reached the force recon position where Captain Mitchell and the rest of his team waited. They'd monitored the battle over the radio, listening to the SEAL element's desperate situation transform into a successful extraction. Hell of a shooting display, Sergeant, Mitchell said quietly. How many confirmed? 26, ma'am. Maybe more I couldn't verify in the chaos. Mitchell studied him for a long moment. The SEAL commander is asking who provided Overwatch. He wants to coordinate a formal commendation. Cole shook his head. No commendation necessary, ma'am. We were in position. We had the capability. We took the shot. That's the job. Saved 16 lives, Cole. That's more than just the job. With respect, ma'am, those 16 SEALs would have done the same for us if positions were reversed. That's what makes us different from the enemy. We look out for each other. Mitchell nodded slowly, a slight smile crossing her face. I'll inform the SEAL commander that Overwatch was provided by attached Marine reconnaissance elements, but the specific operator prefers to remain anonymous. Thank you, ma'am. As Cole cleaned his rifle and prepared for the next mission, he thought about the men he'd saved. He'd never meet them, never shake their hands, never hear their thanks. They'd never know his name or see his face. But 16 warriors would go home to their families. 16 sets of parents wouldn't receive the visit from officers bearing folded flags. 16 wives and girlfriends and children wouldn't have their world shattered by devastating news. That was enough. That was everything. Somewhere in that valley, those SEALs were flying back to base, alive because a Marine sniper had been in the right place at the right time with the right skills. They'd tell their story, the tale of how they'd been saved by a mysterious sniper firing from the rocks, and it would become part of the legend and mythology of Special Operations Forces. But for Cole, it was just another day in the war. Another mission executed, another set of challenges overcome, another group of American warriors brought home alive. He secured his rifle, checked his gear, and prepared to move out. Somewhere out there, in the vast expanse of hostile territory, another mission was waiting. Another group of Americans would need help. And when that moment came, Cole would be ready. Because that was the job. Not the glory, not the recognition, not the medals. Just doing what needed to be done when it needed doing, then disappearing back into the shadows to prepare for the next time. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the Afghan sky in shades of red and gold. In the distance, Cole could hear the faint sound of helicopters returning to base, carrying 16 warriors who'd been given a second chance at life. He shouldered his pack and began moving through the darkness, a silent guardian in hostile lands, ready to do it all again when called upon. Some heroes wear medals. Others simply carry rifles and do the impossible work in the shadows, their names never known, their actions never publicized, their sacrifice never fully recognized. Staff Sergeant Alex Cole was one of those heroes, and he preferred it that way.